Welcome back, everyone. We're taking a deep dive today into leadership for the common good.
Yeah.
Tackling public problems in a shared power world. I know the title's a bit of a mouthful, but stick with us. Okay. This book is really all about giving you a framework for how to make change happen.
Exactly.
Even when it feels like, well, no one's really in charge, you know?
It really does. And that feeling of no one's in charge, that's really at the heart of what this book is calling a shared power world.
Okay, so instead of that traditional hierarchy,
Right.
where you've got someone at the top calling all the shots, we're dealing with something way more complex.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Think of it less like a pyramid, more like a network.
Okay.
All these interconnected groups, organizations, individuals, they've all got their own agendas, their own influences, and that makes leading, well, a very different kind of challenge.
Yeah, I could see how that could feel a little overwhelming, to be honest.
Sure.
If no single person or group has the power to actually solve a problem, where do you even begin?
That's where the book, I think, gets really practical.
Okay.
You know, it's aimed at anyone who's trying to make a difference in this, well, in this kind of messy world.
Yeah.
So public administrators, community activists, even just everyday folks like you who see a problem and want to do something about it.
So it's not just about leadership with a capital L.
Right.
It's about how to get things done when you're not necessarily the one calling the shots.
Exactly. And the book even dives into how people who might want to, well, block progress can actually learn from this, from understanding how power works in this way.
That's a little unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense, right? The more we understand about how power actually operates, the better equipped we are to actually navigate it.
That's the argument. Yeah, transparency.
Right.
Bringing these dynamics out into the open, it actually makes positive change more likely.
All right, so we're in this complex shared power world. But how do we actually make change happen when it feels like we're hitting a wall, you know?
Well, the book has a really interesting take on planning.
Okay.
It's not just about setting goals and timelines. It's about organizing hope.
Whoa, hold on. Planning equals hope. I need you to explain that one.
Well, think about it. When you plan a project, any project,
Yeah.
you're envisioning a future you want to create.
Right.
You're injecting hope into the situation and making progress feel possible, even if the outcome isn't totally in your control.
So even if no one person has the authority to solve the whole problem,
Right.
the act of planning itself can actually be a powerful motivator.
That's the paradox. Yeah, planning makes hope reasonable, even in this shared power world where no one is totally in charge.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful idea.
It is.
But how does this actually play out in the real world?
Well, the book uses 4 very different case studies to show how this works.
Okay.
So we've got the global effort to eradicate AIDS, the work of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and then 2 community-based initiatives right here in Minnesota.
Wow. Okay. So from global health crises to local community projects, that's quite a range.
It is.
But before we get into the specifics of each of those cases, I'm curious about this policy change cycle the book talks about. Is this like a step-by-step guide to making change happen?
Well, not exactly. It's not a simple, step 1, step 2 kind of process.
Okay.
Think of it more like navigating a roundabout.
Okay.
There are these 7 phases you got to move through, but it's not always linear. Sometimes you might have to circle back, adjust your approach, maybe even start over.
All right. So what are these phases we're navigating here?
So it starts with an initial agreement to act, then moves on to defining the problem, then searching for solutions, developing a proposal, getting it adopted, implementing it, and finally evaluating how it all worked out.
Okay, so that's 7, right?
7, yeah. And the book also introduces this idea of policy entrepreneurs, people who can kind of skillfully guide us through this whole cycle.
Policy entrepreneurs, what exactly does that mean?
Well, think of it like the person who spearheaded that park cleanup you went to, right?
Yeah.
They saw a need, rallied support, figured out how to work with the city council, and made it happen. They're the ones who get how to turn an idea into action within this complex system.
So it's not just about having a good idea.
Right.
It's about having the skills and the determination to really see it through.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I really like about this book.
Yeah.
It's not just for people with fancy titles or positions of authority. It's about understanding how change happens and using that knowledge to actually create positive outcomes wherever you are in the network.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
This shared power world, this cyclical policy change process.
Right.
And these policy entrepreneurs who are kind of navigating it all.
Exactly.
But what about the leadership skills? What do you actually need to make this stuff work?
Well, the book breaks down leadership into these three essential dimensions: visionary, political, and ethical.
Okay, so let's unpack those a bit.
Sure.
What does it mean to be a visionary leader in this context?
Visionary leaders are the ones who can look at a really complex situation, see the underlying patterns, and then articulate a compelling vision for the future. So they're the ones who can say, here's where we are, here's where we need to go, and here's how we might get there.
So they're almost like map makers, right?
Yeah.
In this shared power world, helping us kind of see the complexities and figure out a path forward.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Then you've got political leaders.
Right.
They're the ones who are good at building coalitions, understanding how power works, and influencing the people who actually make the decisions.
So they're the ones who know how to get things done, right?
Yeah.
Bringing different groups together, working within the system.
Exactly. And then finally, you have ethical leaders.
Okay.
They're crucial for making sure that the pursuit of the common good is actually grounded in, well, integrity, fairness, and concern for everyone involved.
Because power without ethics can be a dangerous thing, right? We need leaders who not only know how to make things happen, but who are also operating with a strong moral compass.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so the book uses those case studies to show us how these leadership dimensions actually work.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So, for example, in that AIDS case study, was it mostly visionary leaders who were driving change?
Well, you had people like Dr. Jonathan Mann. He was the first director of the World Health Organization's global program on AIDS.
Right.
He was really key in helping shift public perception of the disease.
Okay.
From this idea of fear and stigma to a more compassionate understanding.
So he was able to kind of cut through the noise and offer a clear vision for how to address what was at the time like this unprecedented public health crisis.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just visionary leaders, right?
No, you also had political leaders who were fighting for more funding, for research, prevention, treatment. They worked within governments and across national borders to mobilize resources and implement policies that could actually make a difference.
And what about those ethical leaders? Were there specific examples of that in the AIDS case?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They were vital in advocating for the rights of people living with AIDS.
Right.
Fighting against discrimination, and making sure that care was delivered with compassion and dignity.
So they were really helping to shift the focus away from blame and judgment toward understanding and support.
Yeah, it's a great example of how those three dimensions, visionary, political, and ethical, they all work together to drive real change.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the World Business Council for Sustainable Development? What can we learn from that case?
That one's interesting because it flips the script on how we usually think about business. It shows that businesses can actually be forces for positive change.
It's easy to see businesses as part of the problem when it comes to the environment, honestly.
It is, but this case shows that businesses can be those policy entrepreneurs too. This council brings together leaders from all these different industries, and they develop and advocate for more sustainable practices because they understand that a healthy planet and a stable economy, well, they kind of go hand in hand.
So they're not just talking about corporate social responsibility.
No.
As like a side project.
Right.
They're actually integrating sustainability into their core business strategies.
Exactly. It's not just about doing good, it's about doing good business. And they're using their influence to drive change, both within their own companies and across entire industries.
That's pretty impressive.
It is.
Okay, let's shift gears to those Minnesota-based initiatives.
Sure.
What can we learn from the African American Men Project?
Well, that one really highlights the power of community-driven change.
Okay.
It started with this Hennepin County Commissioner, Peter McLaughlin.
Okay.
He saw all these systemic disadvantages facing young African American men in his community.
Right.
High rates of poverty, unemployment, incarceration.
Yeah.
He knew something had to change.
So it started with someone just paying attention, right?
Yeah.
To what was happening in their own community.
Yeah.
Recognizing a problem that needed to be addressed.
Exactly. And that's often where effective leadership begins. McLaughlin didn't have all the answers, but he knew he couldn't just sit back and do nothing.
Right.
He reached out to community leaders, organizations, residents, everyone to come up with a plan to tackle these issues.
So they realized that it wasn't just about addressing one specific problem,
Right.
but understanding all the interconnected factors
Absolutely.
that were contributing to these systemic disadvantages.
It was a holistic approach looking at everything from education and job training to housing, healthcare, criminal justice reform.
Wow, they really covered it all.
Yeah, they knew that to make real change, you had to collaborate across all these different sectors and have a deep understanding of the community's needs and assets.
That's a great example of how the book's framework can apply to a very specific local context.
It is.
Okay, what about the Vital Aging Initiative? What makes that case stand out?
Well, the Vital Aging Initiative really challenges how we think about aging. The organizers wanted to push back against this stereotype of older adults as being frail and dependent, and highlight their continued potential, for growth, learning, contribution to the community.
It's like they were trying to reframe the whole narrative around aging.
Exactly.
Shifting the focus from decline to possibility.
They didn't just want to improve services for older adults. They wanted to change how we think about aging itself. They had these statewide summits, educational programs. They built this whole network of individuals and organizations committed to supporting vital aging in Minnesota.
I love how you keep coming back to this idea of a network. It really underscores that core concept of shared power.
It does.
And collaborative action that runs through this entire book.
It's a key takeaway. These case studies show that leadership can come from anywhere, not just from the top down. Everyday people, organizers, anyone who's passionate can play a role in creating change.
And speaking of everyday people taking action, I'm curious about the practical side of this book.
Sure.
It's not all theory and case studies, right?
No, not at all.
Are there actual tools and exercises that people can use to apply these concepts in their own lives?
Oh, absolutely. The authors clearly want readers to walk away feeling empowered to be those policy entrepreneurs we were talking about. They give you a whole toolbox of resources, like this power versus interest grid.
Oh, right. We touched on that earlier.
Yeah, it helps you analyze the stakeholders involved in any given situation.
So you can figure out who has the power to make decisions.
Yeah.
Who's actually affected by the issue.
Yeah.
Who might be your allies, who might be your opponents.
It's a great tool for strategic thinking, understanding those dynamics.
So you're not just left with all these high-level concepts.
No.
You actually get some concrete strategies to put those concepts into action.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so valuable, right? It gives you the knowledge and the skills to be a leader, even without a formal title or position.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's really emphasizing empowerment.
It is.
It's a reminder that even in this complex world, we're not powerless.
Right.
We can shape our own futures, contribute to the common good.
Absolutely.
But speaking of the common good, that's a pretty big concept, right?
It is.
Kind of philosophical.
Yeah.
How does the book tackle that?
That's one of the most thought-provoking parts of the book.
Okay.
They acknowledge that the common good isn't like a fixed destination.
Right.
It's an ongoing process, of deliberation, collaboration, ethical decision-making.
So it's not about everyone agreeing on one perfect solution?
No.
It's about finding ways to work together even when we have different values and priorities.
Exactly. And they argue that the process itself, the open dialogue, the willingness to listen, to compromise, to find solutions that benefit as many people as possible, that's just as important as the outcome.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's not about imposing our vision on others.
Right.
It's about creating a space where everyone can be heard.
Yeah.
And contribute to shaping a better future.
And that brings us to the book's ultimate stance. The common good is not a destination, it's a journey. This ongoing effort to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable world for everyone.
It really is, but what does all of this mean for you listening right now?
Right.
How can you take all this stuff about leadership, the common good, this whole idea of a shared power world, and actually use it? Like in your own life?
Well, this book isn't just for, policymakers or CEOs or big shot people. It's really for anyone who wants to make a difference.
So whether you're, leading a team at work, volunteering in your community, or even just trying to make a decision with your family.
It's exciting that.
These ideas could actually be helpful.
Think about it. Have you ever been stuck on a project at work? Like, everyone's got a different opinion. No one wants to take charge.
Happens all the time.
That's a classic shared power scenario right there.
Right.
And this book gives you the tools to understand that and figure out how to move forward.
So instead of feeling frustrated and powerless, you can actually start to see those situations as opportunities to practice leadership.
Exactly. It's about building relationships, communicating well, finding common ground, even when people disagree, and the book shows you how to do that.
And we talked about some of those tools earlier,
Right.
like the power versus interest grid.
Yeah.
But are there others that you think would be especially helpful for our listeners?
One that I found really interesting was this framework for framing problems.
Yeah.
It's basically about how the way we present an issue can totally change how people respond to it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like that whole,
Yeah.
is the glass half full or half empty thing.
Exactly. The facts are the same.
Yeah.
But how we talk about it shapes our whole perspective. And this book helps you think about that strategically.
Okay.
So how to frame a problem so that it actually resonates with people,
Right.
builds support for your ideas, and ultimately makes positive change more likely.
So it's not about manipulating people or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how to communicate in a way that actually works.
Right. Exactly. And that's where that ethical dimension of leadership is so important.
Right, because you need to make sure that
Yeah,
your actions are matching your values, that
absolutely.
you're being transparent,
Right.
honest in how you communicate.
Yeah. And that you're genuinely trying to find solutions that benefit everyone involved.
So it's about leading with integrity,
Exactly.
not just trying to get your own way.
And that brings us back to that core message of the book, right?
Yeah.
Leadership for the common good.
It's about understanding that we're all in this together, that we need to find ways to work together and support each other,
Yeah.
even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard.
Yeah, it's a good reminder,
It is.
especially in a world that feels so divided sometimes.
It can feel that way, but I think this book offers a path forward. It shows us that even in a world where no one has all the answers, we can still make progress. It's about embracing that complexity, understanding how things work, and developing the skills to navigate it all.
So it's about being those policy entrepreneurs in our own lives,
Exactly.
finding problems we care about, envisioning solutions,
Right.
and then taking action.
Even if it's just one small step at a time.
And remembering that we don't have to do it alone, right?
Exactly. Never underestimate the power of working together, talking things out, and genuinely caring about the common good.
That's a great message to end on.
It is.
So if you want to learn more about all this stuff, we highly recommend you check out Leadership for the Common Good, Tackling Public Problems in a Shared Power World.
It's a good one.
And thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep leading for the common good.